When Metroid Prime came out on the GameCube in 2002, people were mind blown. Metroid had gone 3D. Metroid had gone first person, and they'd even done it well. I remember playing this on Wii myself, and the motion controls were a little wacky, but even at the time, I knew how cool it was, how revolutionary it was, and it was just awesome to see Metroid in 3D. It was worth the price of admission. So I would compare Metroid Prime to games like The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I would compare it to Half-Life, or a more recent example, even Stardew Valley, and what all those share in common are they're all foundational to a new way of gaming, and they allowed people that may not have been interested in that genre of gaming to enter it because of how cool and accessible they were. Metroid Prime is among that group. The first moment you play this game, you feel like you're in the future. Even now, there's something about it that feels surreal and epic. Even though it's not that grand open world RPG, it's not Breath of the Wild. You know, there's nothing like that. You don't feel like you're on a truly epic quest, but there's a part of your brain that just senses you're doing something really special. Now, the developers had quite a task in doing this, because this was the first 3D Metroid game. They were setting a new standard here. It wasn't the first 3D Metroidvania, to be clear, but this was a big project because they had the tall task of setting the new standard for 3D Metroidvania. If you ask me, that's exactly what they did. A good Metroidvania to me is relying on a few things. It's relying on an excellent atmosphere, meaning the soundtrack, the art style, the enemy/character design, as well as having a feeling of slow but powerful progress throughout the game, and good, clear level design. Things in other games that might seem essential, like NPCs, having a great story, combat, they aren't as essential in Metroidvanias. Although I do think some Metroidvanias actually do tell really good stories, beautiful and interesting ones. Just some people aren't patient or curious enough to read or sort of learn about those stories in those games. Sometimes the storytelling devices in those games are bad, for sure. They try to do them, but they don't do it successfully. In Metroid Prime, there's a story hidden in all of those little scans that you do. Do I think it's the best storytelling device? No, not really, but it works for Samus. And it works for Metroid. There are also subtle ways that they tell stories in the game too, like the Chozo ghosts, coming after you once you've reached their religious site. Then after that, they're set free and they're crazed from the Phazon, so they're ready to attack you, and you start finding them in more places once you reach that actual religious site. And that's a really cool storytelling device, and it also makes you think about what's going on with the Chozo? What happened here? It's a bit annoying, but yeah, once you reach that certain point, you can suddenly find them all around. And it's interesting environmental storytelling, and I think that's what really good Metroidvanias do well. Throughout the game, you hear the Chozo when you scan their little smoke bubbles or smoke areas to hear what they're thinking or what they were saying. You learn that they're waiting for the Chosen One, essentially. They're waiting for their hero. And you soon learn that they're basically talking about Samus, and then you realize the whole of that world is built around Samus's abilities. And that's another really great storytelling device where it's like only Samus could do these things. It also makes you feel cool too, because you're kind of the chosen one, but they didn't do what a lot of other games do. They didn't make the mistake of immediately making you out to be the chosen one. You actually lost all that, and you have to earn it back and sort of fulfill this Chozo prophecy that you're learning you're taking a big part of. It's cool because they aren't just random puzzles. They found a way to tie these into the gameplay and the story. But yeah, I mean, I won't argue. Primarily with Metroid, it's about the gameplay and the design, to be specific. The moment-to-moment gameplay. The key is you have to not hate the areas you're constantly going to be going through and you have to see over and over and over again. That's what makes it great. And you have to feel like you're progressing, even though the environment around you is actually remaining pretty stagnant. And that's what's so important about these games, and really important that they nail that aspect. What Metroidvania needs to do is allow the missing power-ups, the items, whatever you get, to bring new life to the environment and let the environment speak through that. With that Metroidvania style, it allows the games to seem alive by giving the player new ways to interact with it. So these environments in the games aren't the largest, and they don't blow your mind with how they're an open world or anything like that most of the time. But if they don't nail that small environment that they did make, you'll begin to question what they were even thinking, you know? That's why Metroid Prime is great though, because they nailed the environments. The areas themselves are beautiful, like I was talking about. To be specific, you have the beauty, the sort of unassuming danger in the Tallon overworld. It's sort of lush and colorful. Green, there's water everywhere, it's very vibrant. And then you have the classic oppressive lava and heat of the Magmoor caverns. When you're in there, you feel miles away from that beautiful lush overworld, which is just an elevator away, basically. You can't even believe it's the same planet. And then we've got the Chozo ruins, which are riddled with a long-destroyed ancient civilization. It's sort of the backbone of the story and what you're learning about as you're trying to discover where your equipment went during this crash. And there's just a lot of tragedy and sadness that hangs in the dusty air of the Chozo ruins. While you're walking around, it's as if you can hear their whispers, and at times, they do leave Samus those hidden messages as they're awaiting for their savior. Or of course we have the beautiful Phendrana Rifts. I love a good snow level, especially in Nintendo games, and this one is no different. It's beautiful, it's peaceful. They nailed everything about the game in terms of the area design. Almost everything. Each area have a nice way to help out struggling players in the way that they're designed and when they give you those little hints. It's fun and it's well done and it looks really nice. With an exception of the Phazon mines. I actually have some real beef with those, but even those are still well-designed Metroidvania. I mean, in the end, this game is the quintessential Metroidvania, which makes sense, obviously. That means I might get frustrated, or I might quit for a few days, but then I always find myself thinking about it, and slowly and surely it creeps back into my mind, and I want to go back and solve everything. I want to go over that hump and figure out that challenge. You know, Metroidvanias require something that not every gamer has, to be honest. They require patience. It reminds me of the Reddit page Patient Gamers, which I really enjoy going on. It just requires that patience and curiosity that not everyone comes into a game with, and that's totally fine. In that case, Metroidvanias probably aren't going to be for you. Everyone should try out this game because this one does it exceptionally well. They set that 3D standard. I mean, it is Metroid after all. It's almost a perfect 3D Metroidvania. It does everything so well. It sets that standard for discovering those new ideas, for solving the puzzles, acquiring new items in that Metroidvania setting. For instance, the way the spider ball is teased to you in the grapple beam, and then once you get the spider ball, you immediately think of all those places in the Chozo ruins where you can use it. And it's this great feeling. You actually feel more powerful. They're not just insignificant upgrades. The developers made sure you noticed them and that you thought they were peculiar when you were traveling through, and you kind of make that note. Okay, I need to remember when I'll be able to traverse that, or what kind of power-up might get me up there. The way they tease things throughout and also make them distinct enough in the environments where you kind of realize, okay, I'm going to remember that because that's something that I'm going to go back to and I'm going to be excited when I get that power-up. It's well done and it doesn't make the player feel stupid like some games can. Especially with the feature that tells you basically, hey dummy, there's a power, there's an item, basically there's some strange energy force, there's seismic activity coming from this area. Check it out. No, really, check it out. Seriously. The way they do that is well done and it's accessible and it's done well. That's why I think everyone should play this, because if you don't like this, you're probably never going to like 3D anyway, Metroidvanias. Another big thing, the use of the soundtrack for just ambiance and as a device to make the world feel alive makes it so that as you're walking around Tallon 4, the music is really your only friend. I mean, maybe that's a me issue, but that's a good thing, and that isolation is pretty perfectly fit with Metroid. These games are designed around solving puzzles, discovering those items' powers, and most importantly, I'd argue, striking that balance between seeing an area the 20th time and making sure you don't absolutely hate it. If a Metroidvania can prevent you from hating its areas like that, then it's truly succeeded at making a proper Metroidvania world. And that is what Metroid excels at. They're beautiful, interesting, cozy, yet also ruthless worlds and areas where secrets are scattered around tastefully enough that you almost never feel like they're cheaply hidden, and you don't really feel like your time's being wasted. There are a few moments of that, but it's certainly not enough. It's natural in a Metroidvania. This is also one of the most beautiful games on the Switch, too. Metroid, I would argue, besides maybe Mario, is the premier graphical showcase game on Switch, and that's why Metroid Prime 4 is so exciting. What will they show us for Switch 2? That's going to be where they're really going to set that new standard for Nintendo graphics. It's a good time to get in now too, because it looks like Metroid Prime 4 this year, next year. But the game is just a mix of that beautiful music, beautiful art, and a level design that is a bit frustrating, can't deny it. It's important to note too that I think the design did feel a little dated. That design, the way that you have to backtrack a lot and how they're just basically endless mobs that spawn. They don't spawn immediately, you have to go 2 rooms away most of the time, but it's just sort of annoying, and a lot of them are squishy and it takes a while to get through. So there are those designs that, those gameplay designs that I don't think were necessary. It keeps the actual game interesting. It would be boring if once you clear a room they never come back. It felt a little dated with how fast they come back and how much you have to backtrack, especially if you made a mistake. It can be hard, especially with some of the save distances, stuff like that. So I'm not making this video because it's the perfect game. Yeah, the combat can get pretty wacky too, and it's not the most interesting combat. Like I said, that's not the most crucial thing about these games. Really, it's more about the moment-to-moment gameplay, but it's still fun and it looks so cool, like using this plasma beam, blasting fire at them. And there's difficulties, you know, matching the color scheme to the enemy. Beyond all of that, what makes this game so special isn't all those amazing qualities I was just talking about. To me, this is one of those games that everyone should play because of how special it is to a genre that so many people know and love. It's a historic game, and I also love how much it just screams GameCube era too. I have a lot of nostalgia for that era. I mean, this game graphically and vibe-wise, also interestingly, doesn't feel like a Nintendo game, and I like that about it. They have Kirby, Yoshi, Mario, Donkey Kong, Pokemon, and then there's Metroid. Kind of the ugly or beautiful duckling, however you want to put it. It just doesn't feel right that under that Nintendo umbrella, Metroid has been there since the beginning. It's one of those cornerstone premier franchises. It was released in North America in 1987, but it's right there with Mario in 1985 and Zelda in 1986. So it's one of those cornerstone franchises. The thing about it, the sales just haven't been there, hasn't kept up with its cohorts, meaning Mario and Zelda. Now the sales aren't bad, people do sort of exaggerate those. They're not terrible, they're usually 1 million or more. They're bad relative to those other franchises. That's why it's so exacerbated. Metroid Dread, however, in 2021 was the first game to reach 3 million sales, which is awesome, and it speaks to the future of the franchise, and things are looking good, and people are certainly excited for Metroid Prime 4 because of Metroid Dread. And I think that's why releasing Prime Remastered was a smart idea too, because there's excitement. Metroid Dread was a potential Game of the Year. It won Game of the Year from multiple outlets. So the future of this franchise is looking good, and that's why it's more important than ever to tune into those 3D roots and see, what are they building off of? What am I getting into if I want to play Metroid Prime 4? Another good reason to give this game a shot. But peak innovation, and that's really why people should play it. For what it was mostly, not just for what it is. There's something so cool about seeing that morph ball in 3D for the first time, and it's just cool. One can't help but flash back to that first time they played Metroid on the NES, if you did. And if not, try it on NSO if you have that. It's a hard game, but it's just cool. And it's cool to see how clearly and effectively they put that vision into a 3D world. It's just cool. The upgrades to Samus's cannons, how Samus looks in the suit, and they know that too when you're panning out on the elevator or during the save screen. They nailed the whole, when you get the new thing, you feel really good moment, which is what Metroidvanias have to do as well. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're a careful scanner, and you're paying attention to what happened to the Chozo race, there's even an interesting story to follow. One that's tragic and also hopeful, and one that Samus plays an integral part of. The scanning as a storytelling device, the combat, and the mines, the way that they're designed, the backtracking that's necessary, the distance between save points in the mines is just not fun and not as accessible as almost every other part of the game. I won't go into much more because this video is about how awesome the game is and how much I do think it's worthy of being a game that everyone should play. It lies in gaming's history really for how it's revolutionized the 3D Metroid scene. And there's a reason why they remade this game. It wasn't just for money. It wasn't just to tide over the 3D Metroid fans until Metroid Prime 4. It was to revive what is now classic Nintendo. A classic Nintendo game because of what it did for an entire genre. Alright, so bringing it back to our roots, baby, here we go. So I thought that it'd be a good idea to go back to the original here and pay homage to where it all started. I gotta say, back in the day, Samus really cooked around. In Prime, she's pretty slow, but you know, she's really jumping around, flying. I like the spin with the jump too. But what you're witnessing is also me after multiple game overs. I already grabbed the ball, morph ball. So you're seeing the result of a couple of failures. I wanted to test it out before I embarrass myself live here. I mean, it's pretty cool to see because you can see how they kind of turn these elements from this game, whoa, frame rate, into, you know, a 3D universe. And you can see some of those aspects even in this game. And you can see the kind of vision they were working with. So yeah, it's cool to play, it's cool to see, and it's hard as balls. So I'm sure everyone wants to know what this game would get on the Tigerometer 3000 ohmmeter-ometer. I had to dust it off, give it a couple slaps, a little bit of this, and it came out at a 90. So this game does have some flaws that haven't aged well. But bottom line, everyone should play Metroid Prime. And that's because it's a milestone game. It's a revolutionary title where they managed to morph, something that was always known as 2D and a formula that worked so well in the 2D setting into 3D environments and first person. That's what makes the game so important. So you should play this game, and it's just fun anyway. So that's all, folks. I'll see you next time. Peace.